Welcome everyone to our episode 97 in our podcast Cultivating a New Generation. In today's episode, we have an honored guest, Tiffany West, and we are going to talk about a very exciting topic, how unresolved trauma hinders your health. And in order to begin, I'm going to introduce Tiffany West is the proud owner and creator of Interior Health Design LLC, an inner wellness life coaching company that promotes healthy living and soul-based healing from the inside out. She's a trauma-informed emotional care coach, helping women thrive internally and remove blocks to achieve optimal health so they can live life with more energy, peace, and joy. Tiffany went from being a corporate high achiever, full-time student, and single mom doing everything she could just to make ends meet to complete burnout, trying to maintain such a high stress lifestyle. She took back control of her health and her life, now sharing her gifts and passion to help others do the same. She's a wife and proud mama of two beautiful boys. Tiffany loves serving others and finds the most joy in nature, cooking, nourishing foods, dancing, meditation, and healing her body. So, without further ado, this is an amazing episode that is going to really unpack the information of trauma and how it affects ourselves. So, thank you, Tiffany, for being here. And to begin with the topic, how can you tell me that this life unfold and how did you arrive to a care coach?
Yeah, thank you, David. I'm so happy to be here.
Mhm.
Wow, where do I start with this long story and sum it up? Let me start just to give you a little pretext. I was a very, very highly sensitive child growing up, very sensitive soul, everything to emotionally sensitive, physically sensitive. My body was very sensitive. And back then, there was not a lot of terminology for that. And so I learned how to very quickly stuff my big emotions way far down so that I could fit in, be normal. And there were times where my parents even considered my emotions so big to be disrespectful. So feeling anger and feeling more intense emotions was always something I interpreted as being wrong and not okay. And so I learned to stuff that down into my body very deeply and grew up very athletic. My dad pushed me really hard in gymnastics and karate, and I was really good at doing that. But because of the push and not really feeling like I had a say in it, by the time I turned 18, I kind of threw all of that to the wind and moved out and wanted to do my own thing. So, starting in my early 20s, I started developing a lot of chronic health issues. Started with headaches. I used to get migraines all the time. I'd go to the ER. I would be told nothing was wrong. So, I was just popping Excedrin, migraine like they're candy, and developed chest pain, eczema. So my body was starting to really start to talk to me and show me signs. But at that time, I hadn't done this work, and I just overlooked it like most of us do. It's no big deal. I was young. I was partying and I was having a good time, working full time and kind of climbing that corporate ladder. So I didn't think much of it. When I got pregnant with my oldest son, I was about 27, developed asthma, really bad allergies, and then I started to notice that the chest pain, the headaches, all of my symptoms were exasperating after he was born. I was a single mom with him and working full time in my corporate job and just going, calling it high achieving, but really I was burning myself completely out and had no idea. So, what stopped me in my tracks in my 30s, I had really chronic, debilitating chest pain. The doctors after years of going to the doctors and to being told nothing was wrong with me, I remember demanding that I get an answer one day when I went into the arthritis doctor and I said, I'm not leaving here until you tell me what's wrong with me. I have been through this ringer for 10 years. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, and I need you guys to fix me. So they did. They called me back with a diagnosis, a very rare condition of arthritis in my chest. Not much they could do. I couldn't get steroid shots or anything there because it was too close to my organs and basically sent me on my way with a lifetime prescription of meds. And so at that point, I was at a crossroad and I knew that I didn't want to be on medication my whole life. I knew that there was more, and I was really frustrated with our medical system at the time. I was angry. I felt like they failed me. So I remember looking down the barrel of two roads, and that's when I decided to take my health in my own hands. I got certified to be a health coach, and I really started shifting my diet, changing my exercise routines, getting back into being athletic again. And it worked really well for a long time, for about a year. And I noticed that I was feeling great. I was losing weight. From the outside looking in, I looked good, but I just still wasn't feeling all the way well. So I got certified to be a transformational coach and a life coach, and I started doing more mindset work and affirmations and manifesting and law of attraction. I really love that as well. And I tried to think my way through the way I was feeling, and think my way out of it. And that just didn't work either. It took me so far. And that's what really got me researching in the emotional realm of, what is going on with me emotionally? Why do I feel so unsettled inside? Yet on the outside, I look and appear to be so healthy. And I started doing a lot of research on the connection between unresolved emotional trauma, relational trauma, and our physical health and our relationships, finances, everything, how it impacts our lives. And that's what landed me into the emotional care realm, where I'm like a recovery coach for people. When people get a physical injury, they typically go to the ICU or the hospital, and they have those first responders and they recover. And that's what I help people do with emotional injuries. I help them wake up to the symptoms that are pointing back to unresolved trauma. And then once they're aware of the trauma, most people have a very intense reaction to that emotionally, and I help them care for themselves and recover through that process. So that's what landed me where I am today.
Wow, that's such an amazing story. And throughout the story, I was just reflecting, of course, in many of the small pieces that you put together to find your own path. And that is a synchronicity with what I do, because I have also pillars of health that speak about this. And as you mentioned, there are so many things that we don't take into account in terms of how our health uh, takes a score for many of the things that
Yes.
we just, as you mentioned, we repressed. Many times when we were children, we didn't know how to express them. So we swallow them, or we took it out on exercise, which is something that I also do a lot and did a lot of training and amateur competing and all of those things. So I
Yes.
can relate to that, because that was my outlet for
Yes.
emotional pain.
And a
And always,
healthy one too, right?
yeah, it is a very healthy one, and it is something that works for some time. But as you mentioned, there comes a time when there are some consequences also of just relating to the physical thing and not witnessing that you are suffering other things, and not do some work about that pain that, of course, is difficult to process. No. So my first question that comes to my mind is, how, when you were younger, did you felt those emotions, and what was your first reaction to some emotional things that you lived or that you processed? What was the first reaction that came to you when you were younger, and what was your best tool?
Yeah, I would have to say when I was younger, like as a child, I didn't necessarily have tools, but I developed coping mechanisms. And I remember signs of anxiety coming on early. I used to pull my hair out. It's something that I've done since I was really young, a nervous condition. And my parents literally just overlooked it. My dad thought it was funny. So I thought it was funny too. I was young, 8, 9 years old. I didn't think it was much of it. And my mom worked a lot. And so she's like, I used to do your hair all the time and I never noticed your hair, but I would pull my hair out. And that was early on. Of course, I didn't connect that with the way that I was coping with some of these big emotions that I was feeling, and didn't know how to express, like you said, and wasn't modeled how to express them, or nor did I feel safe to express them in the environment in my household. It just wasn't, emotions was, we just we were trying to survive. There wasn't any room for that, right? Unless they were happy ones. So as I got older, I know the working out and the training and things like that, that was a healthy outlet too, but I didn't realize I was suppressing emotions through that either, or expressing them. And then when I got to be a teenager and like 19, 20 years old, I partied a lot. I drank, I smoked, I distracted myself. My life was really loud in the name of fun. You know, if I could go back and do that all over again, I probably would, to be honest with everybody, because it was a lot of fun. But I didn't realize what I was. I didn't realize I was suffering in those times. I thought I was really just fitting in with the crowd and having a good time.
Mm,
And so over the years, just noticing my coping mechanisms were so unhealthy. Then I threw myself into work. And I was very, very focused on being high driven and just really being successful at the work I did when I was working in corporate. And I want to answer your question that that was what I believe to be one of the tools that I used to really start focusing more on my achievements
mhm,
as I got older, because that's what I got praised for as a child. So I kind of mirrored that as an adult. Being very sensitive, I didn't realize the effect and the impact that not feeling my emotions and not healing my trauma was having on my nervous system,
mm,
which was creating all that dis-ease inside of my body and all of the health symptoms that I was experiencing. So as I started to get into the realm of health coaching, one of the main things that really helped me was just to become aware that something was off. Whereas I was so in the clouds earlier on that I just overlooked my health symptoms, and I just whatever, it'll go away. I just buried everything under the sand. So once I woke up to it and started to become aware that it was my body trying to tell me something, that's when things started to shift for me.
mm. Thank you. Thank you for explaining. And I know that when we are younger, we just have coping mechanisms, as you mentioned. They are not tools, of course. We don't know what to do, and we try to do our best with what we have. And many times it's a model, many times it's an outlet, as you mentioned. And this is what many people do. And that's, of course, that I'm sure that your clients face these kind of things, because as adults, there are a lot of people, and I dare to say that more than 80% of people everywhere in the world, because this is not something that happens in certain countries, this is something
No,
that happens almost
worldwide.
worldwide, because this was the culture. The culture was not to show emotions. There are so many layers under that, and there is some pressure of society of perform, of achieve, of compete, and
Yes.
all of those things that just make you into a mold, into a program, and you just forget that, and you are just in automatic mode
Yep.
and just living through the pain many times, no? So what would you say that um, can awaken people, or can help people to become more aware what of what they are doing? What are some of the signals? What are some of the subtle symptoms that may show up in anyone's life, and how can they address them instead of looking for quick solutions?
Yes, absolutely. First and foremost, this is the advice I wish I would have gotten, is that our bodies are never at war with us. Our bodies are never against us. And I know in Western medicine, there's a lot of terminology around like autoimmune disease and our body attacking itself. I just have a hard time feeling into that. That just doesn't resonate, because I do believe that our bodies are designed innately to heal themselves if given what they need. Sometimes we just have to get out of the way. So one of the first things I would say is listen to your body. If you are having any kind of little symptom, a rash, for me, my hair started falling out in my early 30s. Um, Digestive issues, gut issues, things like that, those chronic headaches that I was getting, anything that is chronic, especially, and doesn't go away, By the time it's chronic, your body's been trying to get your attention for a while. But anytime that your body starts to feel off or you feel any type of dis-ease, that's what I would say the first point of awareness would be, is to really listen to your body versus let me go fix this problem. First thing is really connecting in and really tuning into, oh, I notice that I've got this sensation going on inside. I wonder what that's about. And just learning how to connect with that on a level many people have not been taught. So for some, that might feel very weird and foreign, because we are taught to go fix it,
Yeah.
right?
We are taught to just take a pill and,
Yeah, fix it.
and that's
Quick
it,
fix it.
and forget about the pain and just keep moving because there is time. There is, of course, many times economical pressure to just go to work and to do your own thing, and that's it. You forget about the pain and you think that it was just something, a bad day, and that's how you call it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know for me, the chronic pain ended up being such a blessing because my body didn't stop. It's like the pain won't go away until we honor it and we listen to it and we get the message that's coming through. And I didn't know what the message was. I would hear that all the time and I'm like, well, how do you listen to your body, or like what does that even mean? And that was like really my pain was my portal into what I'm doing now. I just didn't, my brain couldn't comprehend that. So I really had to trust the process and trust in the unknown and trust the wisdom, the divine wisdom of my body to really just continue to follow the breadcrumbs, do more studying, do more research, learn about food, and then learn about, oh, but our nervous system is at the core of everything. So a lot of people, I know for me, when I was eating really healthy, because I was in such a chronic state of stress and fight or flight, my body was in survival mode. So it could not receive all of the healthy nutrients that I was putting into it. And that's what led me to believe that, okay, I'm eating all this good stuff. I'm taking my supplements. Why do I still not feel better? That's what kept me digging and digging and digging. And so I just kept listening to my body. I couldn't ignore it. And trust me, this was no walk in the park. I was
No.
frustrated. I felt like my body was working against me. I felt like something was wrong with me, all of the things. But it brought me here, and I'm really grateful for the journey because now I can see under the hood. I see what was really needing my attention, and it was those emotional needs that I hadn't been meeting.
Yes, and I can relate to many of those signals and pain because, as I mentioned, I also experienced many of those uh, sometimes louder signals that
Mhm.
made my body stop and just take a rest of 1 or 2 days, and just those days were the ones where I tried to listen as much as possible to what was the message and just to turn off the speed or the rhythm. And as you mentioned, there are people that can have a threshold that is higher, and they
Yes.
can withstand more pressure and more stress, but that doesn't mean that their bodies are not uh, being self-consumed and being self-deteriorated. They just think that they are stronger, but that doesn't mean anything. And as you mentioned, the body is never against us. On the contrary, the body is the best wisdom
Oh my gosh,
uh,
yes.
mirror that we should pay attention. I was just listening today to an episode where they interview Deepak Chopra, and he was mentioning about the signals of the cells of apoptosis when they have to die and they have to renew, and when they don't follow these kind of signals of apoptosis to just that was the time of the cell that it needed to perform its function, they become cancerous cells.
Hmm.
So that signal is extremely important for your body to pay attention to. And if the cell doesn't follow that signal, probably is something that it is stuck there, because cancer and many other chronic diseases, now we know that cancer is one of the chronic diseases too, and they can just build up this kind of stress, this kind of signals, and start uh, permeating into epigenetic changes. And
Yes.
those are the ones that turn on the genes in order to develop either an autoimmune disease or any kind of chronic ailment, no?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I want to add to that too for those who, because I have a good friend who says, like, usually when I was experiencing tons of digestive issues, like any little thing I put in my body that my body didn't like, my stomach would let me know. And she would always laugh and say, I wish I had that problem. There's nothing my stomach rejects, right? And so I just want to mention to people who aren't having physical symptoms, another symptom that was really under the radar for me is I was always irritated. Every little thing got it, even to this day, is something I have to really be mindful of and nurture and work on because of the repressed anger as a child and not being able to express my anger that didn't only create inflammation in my body and create chronic physical pain, but mentally and emotionally, those were the symptoms of something deeper needing to be addressed. Always, check your mood. Check in with, are you having a lot of mood fluctuations? A lot of people will chalk it up, oh, it's just your hormones, or oh, you're just getting older. Or for women, it's just about to be your cycle or after having a baby. All of those things, yes, do contribute to our moods. But if you're noticing, you find yourself saying, oh, that's just my personality. Oh, I've always been this way. That's a symptom. That's a clue that there's more underneath the hood that needs to be addressed and cared for. Those emotional wounds.
Yes, I completely agree with that because, as you mentioned, we pay attention when it is a louder symptom. We pay attention when it is something that we can see, but there are some things that are emotional that the
We
same.
have no idea.
We
Yeah.
don't pay attention. We say, well, this is normal. This is just what happens. This is because my father was like that or
Yeah.
whatever excuse you have, and that's not the way you have to be. And becoming an observer of your own behavior and of your own reactions is the best way you can notice that you are not in tune with your emotions and something is going on. Probably is something that happened a week ago or some days before. Probably is something that you have been building up. Nobody
Mhm.
knows but yourself. And if you don't stop and make a pause and do something about it, either talking with someone as we are trying to give practical tips to people, or journaling or meditating
Yes.
or going inside and just being in silence. I think that people don't even know what is being in silence.
Well, what I think people interpret that as is boredom and restlessness.
Yes,
There's
boredom.
not enough going on. I'm bored. Let me find something. And that's really our body and our brain's attempt to keep us safe because when we have to sit and settle with the unresolved energy and emotion that's in us, that why would we want to do that? Like our brain is like, no way, abort mission. Let me keep you safe. Yeah, in an effort to protect us from feeling any of that dis-ease or that discomfort.
Yes, and that would be a very good test for people.
Yeah.
If you can withstand 10 minutes or 5 minutes in silence, in complete silence, just pay attention to the thoughts. Pay attention to
Yes.
the thoughts that come. Pay attention to how are you feeling, because probably you will feel this anxiety. Probably you
Yes.
will feel this boredom or this desperation, and that is something that you have to, if you don't like to journal, because I have some people that have told me I don't like to write. Okay, don't write, record yourself, and that's it.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah.
record yourself, speak with yourself, and notice what is happening, just as if you were talking with someone. Or try to look for a friend, try to look for someone, and if, of course, if it is bigger and a bigger issue, look for help. That's
Of
something
course.
that we are not used to do also,
No.
asking for help. No?
No. And so, I mean, thankfully, counseling, therapy, coaching, that's becoming so normalized now these days, to where it's more of a maintenance. It's like I couldn't imagine not having a coach or not having support or having a therapist. It's just like having car insurance now. But, decades ago, it was something like, oh my God, if you're seeing a therapist or a counselor,
Mm.
you're something's wrong with you, right? You're off the rails. And so a lot of people are coming from being embarrassed and feeling ashamed of having to reach out for help. And a lot of different cultures and family dynamics, it's it's not okay to go out and seek. Nothing's wrong with you, right? You don't tell our business in the family. You just, go take a nap or go, it's not that big of a deal. You just get over it. And it's just the culture that I was raised in too. It's just like you don't go get therapy. You go smoke some weed or go do something to escape those feelings. And so, yeah, teaching this concept of coming home to yourself and being in silence, that can be very nerve-wracking for people, and sometimes very unsafe. So I would want to add a disclosure to that. Being an emotional care coach, if you find yourself sitting in silence and trying that, and you feel like you're getting very triggered or emotionally flooded, I would advise doing that in the space of a professional that is trauma informed, because you're probably having some really unsettling and nerve-wracking trauma that's trying to bubble up, and you may not have the tools or the capacity to handle that, and that could be more damaging. So if you feel really super uncomfortable doing that and you just can't, because it's bringing up, you feel panicked or something feels wrong, then I would suggest definitely not doing that by yourself. But if it's just that you're antsy and you're just used to, having your mind busy and occupied all the time, take David's advice. It really does help to start to learn how to be with yourself and be in that silence, because it speaks volumes when we can get out of our heads for a while and have that chatter start to fade in the background.
Yeah, thank you for pointing out that, because um, I think that, as you mentioned, there are people that really can go from 0 to 100 in terms of the emotional scale, and this is not safe for that kind of people, and it is not something to that we have to be labeled or stigmatized, or, as you mentioned, we don't have to feel bad about that. It's just something that is coming up, and it is a good sign. It is also, I think that it's extremely important. How can you help people to not label themselves about these issues that come out, and look at them with a negativity bias? What can you tell people so that they don't just label themselves, as you mentioned, not being like you are wrong and just take a nap? So what can you tell them so that they don't feel that shame?
Yeah, and if you are feeling that shame, I'm just I know that feeling and I know how hard that is. And I'm just sending you so much love, because shame is probably one of the hardest emotions to feel. I know for me in my journey, that's the one that I always tried to escape the most. But what I want to tell everybody is we're all human. If you're a human being, you have suffered. There has been pain. There is going to be trauma. And when I say the word trauma, I know for me, I used to think it has to be a big catastrophic event. And my area of expertise is in the more invisible wounding, the emotional and the relational traumas. And even deeper than that, trauma is more about the way your system receives a stress versus the event itself. So you could be traumatized, just so I can help people see that it doesn't have to be some humongous event. If an alarm goes off in your school when you're in elementary school, like they do that fire alarm and it rattles your system, and nobody's there to help you feel safe. And so that sensation of overwhelm in your nervous system lives in your body until that wound is addressed and healed. So you may go on logically feeling like, oh, that scared me, and I'm just going to go run off with the rest of the kids. But if it's never addressed, just think of things like that happening over and over and over, building that emotional wounding inside of you. So I just want to normalize it for people that we all experience pain, suffering, trauma, and we all have emotions. There is no human on this planet that is emotionless. I know a lot of people who claim to be, I'm not a very emotional person. cool. That's trauma, but we'll save that for another episode. You may not be expressing your emotions because you've mastered the art of suppressing them like I did so that you don't have to feel them and recreate that pain. However, if you're human, we're all designed with emotions.
Mm.
And so to feel shame or to have that sensation of that feeling come up or any of the feelings, guilt, um, heartache, sadness, depression, all of those more feelings that we kind of want to bury our head in the sand. I just want you to know you're not alone. We're all human and we all have emotions and we all cycle through all of them.
Yes. Um, Thank you for mentioning that, because also there are several types of trauma, and many of them are unnoticed because we don't even recognize that we are also different. There are people that are more sensitive, and as you mentioned, you were more emotionally sensitive to many of those things, although you have to repress them. No, and I also find myself being sensitive in terms of many of the things that happen, because I just cried more than my brother, and I just took it out uh, in sometimes in an easier way. Although I have seen with him that he sometimes represses and he takes it out on, I don't know, destroying some things, and are
Mhm.
trying to just crush them, and he feels good about doing that. Of course, it's not damaging anyone, but it's something that is speaking out on a trauma, and how do you address it when you are younger or when you don't know what to do. And
Mhm.
that means that also when you are more sensitive, you are prone to be shamed because you cry, or because you feel scared about something that other people don't feel scared. And that's something that we have to also be more compassionate about
Yes.
others, because here in Mexico, for example, we have an alarm system with earthquakes, and when we hear that alarm, just by listening to the sound, that's more stressing than the real earthquake
Yeah.
sometimes, because it is just telling us that what is going to happen, we don't know, and we have 1 minute to react to that
Wow.
alarm. But at least we have that system that is implemented, and we need to get used to. But many people, including, of course, many animals, show their sensitivity on this kind of sound, and they recognize that it's a signal of danger. And I can bet that if we measure any kind of stress hormone in people when that alarm sounds, they are going to be in the roof. They are going to
Yes.
be in the roof, and they need at least some hours to go to the same level. And some people don't can even sleep that day, no, for
Yeah.
example. So
Yes.
that's also something that we have to learn, how our bodies process uh, our emotions, no? So what can you say about the time, about sometimes small issues, let's say small issues like this alarm sound can be processed in our bodies?
First thing is to connect with the sensation of feeling that charge or feeling that trigger, that whatever that is in your body. What helps me um, now, I want to go back because this used to be harder for me when I was numb to my emotions. It was hard to feel where I could feel that sensation in my body. But typically, when an alarm goes off like that and it rattles me, my heart is racing,
Mm.
right? Or my stomach dropped and I feel like those butterflies in my stomach. So really just really connecting in with like, oh wow, and just being with the sensation versus our knee-jerk reaction to react to it, to run or to jump or to cry. And all of those things I'm not saying are wrong, but when they're patterned that way and we're conditioned to respond that way, really becoming aware of like, oh, this is what I do when I'm highly triggered, and actually allowing yourself to notice that and become the observer, that'll help you start to detach from being so reactive to it. And that's the first step in starting to build more self-awareness and more emotional control. And then I'm speeding up this process, of course. Once you are aware, then you can pause. And then, in that pause, you have a choice. Do I want to go the same route that I've always gone, or do I want to try to respond in this differently? And the pause in and of itself is a different response because you're not reacting. And that's going to start to really help train your brain and your system that there's another way to respond to this, and a way that's going to help you become calm. And the more you can start to practice that awareness, that noticing what's going on, becoming the observer, then pausing, and then knowing, standing in your power of choice, that's when you have the magic wand and you can decide, oh, I want to breathe through this. Or maybe I want a couple of minutes to go stand outside in the sun and let the wind hit me for a minute, right? Whatever it is that your safe place that brings you calm, you'll start to learn more about what helps you soothe yourself, like that whole concept of self-soothing. That only happens when you can pause and slow down and really start to connect with what's happening inside of you. When my heart beats fast, I love to put my hands on my chest and just kind of hold and support myself and tell myself, wow, my heart's beating really fast. And letting myself know that was really scary. Just that self-validation helps calm my system almost immediately. My recovery time is not as long because I've learned the art of doing that.
Yes, I can really also remind me of sometimes that I feel that anger sometimes about the things that happen in my life and the things that happen in the environment, and those triggers, we need to be able to just pay attention on how we feel, as you mentioned, for example, the alarm, and just not doing what everybody does, not because it's wrong, as you mentioned, just because you can do something else. And doing something different, as you mentioned, is going to let your body know that it is not a threat,
Yes, it
that
creates
it is
safety.
safe, that it is telling you something and you have to do something, but you don't have to do it right away. You can just wait, pause, and react. For example, right in this new era of the alarm system of the earthquakes, I don't go down immediately. I just wait and I just watch the lamps. If they are moving too much, then I go down because I don't have too many floors to go down. And that's it. And I know, of course, that this area is safe in terms that we haven't had anything, neither in the two big earthquakes. So that's something that I have developed, and that's something that I have had to pass to my daughter, because when she's here and we hear the alarm, what I tell her is wait, because we don't know how big it is. Just put your shoes on, put
Get
some,
prepared.
yes, prepare, and let's go near to the door, and then we see what happens.
Yeah,
Nothing,
that pause.
yes,
Yeah,
and nothing bad is going to happen. We know that this area is safe. We know that we are safe because we are very quickly downstairs, and there is area where we can protect. So that's what we have to do, because usually when you let the triggers go up also very fast, we end up doing things that are more harmful for
we do.
ourselves.
And more damaging. Yeah.
And we can damage other people, of course,
Yes.
because of
Yeah.
the reaction, no?
So true. Very true. Yeah. I mean, just in healing ourselves and becoming more self-aware and really becoming more emotionally intelligent and aware, it really does not just do you a service, but it does everybody around you a service too. And yeah, being able to recognize your triggers, recognize your reaction to your triggers without having to figure out why it's happening or digging deep down into your past. It's just a matter of, how do I want to choose to show up for myself differently than I have been, or maybe I never have before, and how do I want to start doing that for myself and really modeling to myself how I want to be nurtured, even if I didn't have anybody to model that to me. Now's my opportunity that I get to decide how I want to treat myself. And for all the parents out there, typically just think back to how you treated your newborn babies when
Mhm.
they were when they were unsettled in any way. It's just instinctual to be nurturing. Is everything okay? Let me hold you. Let me validate. Oh, you're crying. I see that you're sad. Those types of things are really, really healthy ways of mirroring and modeling, creating secure attachments with another person or within ourselves. And unfortunately, many of us didn't get that from our caregivers. No
Mhm.
fault of our caregivers. It's generational trauma being passed down, right? They can't give what they didn't receive. And so most of us are learning how to reparent and do this for ourselves as adults. And it's a beautiful thing to do. It's nothing to be ashamed of or embarrassed of. It's very empowering to be able to give yourself what you need in those moments of alarm or triggers, because once you start to realize that you have more leverage over that than you thought, it's so empowering. And then you start to feel very powerful, and not in an egotistical way, but you feel really in tune and in touch with this divine power that most of us don't get to access because we're so clogged up in our system with all of the trauma.
Yeah. And there is something there that we can also address for people, because many times our reactions are, as you mentioned, passed on from generation to generation in terms of seeing our parents, and in terms of biological substances that were passed on generation after generation. And probably that's why many people are more sensitive to certain things that previous generations, because all of those triggers, all of that cortisol, all of that hormones were just epigenetically passed on. And that is a concept that we just discovered in the last 30 or 40 years. And that's science that we didn't know. But now we can also, it is not about blaming, it is just about recognizing that many times our triggers are also a response of the body accumulation of several generations of stress.
Absolutely.
No?
Yes. And if anything, far from blame, it's more of like an awareness that will help you bring compassion to your parents, to your caretakers, to those generations, and bring a lot of forgiveness in the picture, which has to happen for healing. Just to notice the struggle that they all went through
Mhm.
and the survival mode that they had to be in order to survive those times. I mean, there was no room for emotion.
Mhm.
You know, when my mom was growing up, there was no, they couldn't do that. It was either I'm going to survive or I'm going to feel this. And it was a no-brainer. So just to understand the times that they were in, the situation, the circumstances, and then also just understanding just the way that it works. Most of your triggers are not even yours. They were adopted and
Mhm.
passed down without your permission. The cool thing about it is when you can learn to wake up, become more aware, and start to understand your triggers and then know where they're coming from, you can start to respond differently, and then you can start to decide, do I even want to keep do I even want to keep this,
Mm.
right? But many people mistake their triggers and their trauma for their personality. And that's one thing that I have to say. A lot of who you think you are, if you haven't done a lot of the deep inner work, is not who you are. It's not your authentic self, right? It's they've just been protective patterns that you've developed over time, and conditioning and programming that's just been a part of your makeup and how you've been molded. And then it's kind of just been lumped into like, oh, that's just who I am. That's just my personality. So I thought I was one way, and this doing all this healing work, I feel like a completely different person. And years of things that I thought was my personality was actually just the unresolved trauma.
Yes, and as you mentioned, just reviewing your history, replaying some of the episodes of your life, you can see that you are now not even similar to the person that you were before, and also trying to um, understand that this is the evolution that we should follow, trying to recognize that, of course, we were humans, we are all humans, we were younger and we didn't know what to do, and what you did before is not something that you should blame for. It's something that you should just say, well, I was that person. Now I'm grateful that I recognize many of these signals and I pick up and I did and I ask for help. And my health is much better now that I have done this path of recognizing the trauma, of knowing that it doesn't have to be capital T trauma. And it's something that everybody has and everybody should do something about it in the pace that they want. Of course, this is not a perfect life, in the pace that you can withstand, in the pace that you really feel comfortable with, and in a safe space and with a professional, of course.
Yes.
And also noticing that our reactions can save our lives many moments, at many moments. And I was just going to tell you a story that reminded me about a reaction that I had. Probably more or less 15 years ago, I was driving in a highway from a trip that I did with an ex-girlfriend, and we were we had a flat tire in my side, in the side of the driver, and the car couldn't stay on course. And I tried to do everything, and those are seconds and moments that you don't have too much time to decide what to do. And as much as I tried to pull the wheel and try to make it stable, that was worst because the car was just flipping around, and I just released everything. And I just said, those were seconds that I just closed my eyes and I dropped the wheel and I said, whatever is going to happen, make it happen. No, but I flashed my life in really, really fast forward. And I said, and I felt something that told me that it was going to be safe doing that. But, and we just crashed into a kind of wall, and we could go over the wall and just fall.
Oh, wow.
It was very, very dangerous.
Wow.
But the car just flipped around, and it didn't happen. It didn't go the other way, and nothing happened to us. And we were completely fine. And it was, I can call that a miracle because
Oh, man.
I just close my eyes and I just react like I cannot do anything, and as much as I can try whatever it is, probably I would make it worse. So releasing was the best option. And
Wow.
sometimes in our lives, releasing things, releasing the pressure, releasing the
The need to
problem,
control, right?
the need to control things, the need to do something because we are used to doing something every day.
Yep.
Is the best response that your body needs.
And
Really.
it's the response that's going to help calm your nervous system back down into a regulated state. Most of us are operating on a dysregulated nervous system and in a high stress state, but because we've been doing it for so long, it feels normal. That's why calming down feels boring. That's why we feel restless, is because we're not used to this resting, relaxed state at all. But just like you were fighting the wheel, we do that with our emotions. We do that with our feelings. And it makes it worse. It's just like throwing gasoline on a fire. So what a beautiful story and a metaphor for the way that we can maneuver and manage our lives, is sometimes we don't have to keep such control. Trying to control everything actually puts us more out of control. Trying to control our feelings, trying to feel like we are stuffing them, or we are reacting to them, or we are avoiding them, or fighting them and resisting in some way. We could just release that fight and release that sense of like, I've got to control this, and trust that things are going to happen the way that they're going to happen. It just brings so much less pressure to your life and to the things that you feel like you have to do every day. It takes so much of that stress off. And I'm just thankful that you're here to tell that story, because that sounded like it was very scary in the moment and very traumatic for both you and your friend at the time. So yes, what a beautiful story.
It was, and it was amazing that when we look at the car, we said it's really a miracle that we are here, because of course it was total lost, and it was just a presence, and it is just seconds that tells you, close your eyes, release. That's it. That's all I could think of in the last moments when I did that, was everything is going to be okay. I listened to a voice that said,
Yeah.
everything is going to be okay, just release.
And I even imagine that it was beyond thinking. That was coming from your soul, your intuition saying, let go, right? Just let go. I got this. This is bigger than you. You can't think your way through this one. Right.
Yes.
And yeah, and that it's just such parallel to the way that we live our lives, most of us. Just on autopilot, like you said, constantly in our heads, thinking of everything, figuring everything out. We forget we have these additional wealth of resource in our bodies, the wisdom in our body, the wisdom of our soul. It's so divine, but our brains can't wrap around that. So it's scary to trust that sometimes.
So finally, to wrap up all this conversation that I think it's amazing, we have a lot of information that we unpack. How can you tell people, or how can you support people in terms of giving them advice about trauma and their health?
Yes. If you are experiencing any nagging symptom, even if it's sneezing all the time or having this, subtle cough or whatever it is, just know that, or you're irritable like me, if it's showing up in your mood, or really angry or feel like you just can't, something just in your life just feels off. Just know that there's typically a root back to that, and coming inward and tuning in is the opposite of what we're all taught to do, but that's the road that I've been taking, and that's where I found my wealth of knowledge, where I've found so many answers, so much healing, more than I ever found looking outward first. I don't want to say that looking outward is bad. I just do believe that there's a sequence that we can follow, and trusting yourself and your body and really listening to what your body is telling you through any type of discomfort or dis-ease in your life. They're all clues and symptoms trying to point you back to what it is that you really need on an emotional level. And then reaching out for support to get help to unpack that would be my advice.
Thank you. Thank you, Tiffany, and thank you everyone for listening. I just lastly want to ask you, how can people find you in the social platforms? And we, of course, are going to point out in the comments to your social handle. The platforms, please.
Yes, I'm on Instagram at Tiffany Coach Me. You can find me on Facebook under Tiffany West, Aurora, Colorado, because there's a ton of Tiffany West. And I'm on LinkedIn under Tiffany West. My business is interior health design.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Tiffany, for your wisdom. Thank you, everyone, for
Thank
listening.
you.
It was an amazing episode. And of course, we encourage you to ask questions, to give us comments, and to stay in contact with us. Thank you. We will see each other in our next episode. Bye.
Bye-bye.